Hello again and welcome back to In Between Sundays with me, Marco Arroyo. Before we get into the video, if you would consider liking the video, subscribing, and also supporting the Patreon, the link is in the description below. Today I'm doing a podcast with a preacher that I know by the name of Jack Wilkie. How should Christians engage in the culture that we live in today? How are we supposed to do that, and how far can we go when we do that? That's a big question, and there's a lot to be said about that. Me and Jack had a fascinating conversation. I'm hoping it'll bless your life too. Again, I appreciate your support always. Let's get into the conversation. Well, today I'm super happy to be joined by my friend, Jack Wilkie. Now, it's very interesting, Jack. Well, how are you? Hi, by the way.
Doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I want you to be able to say hi and not have to sit there while I talk about you. I don't know if you remember this. We met briefly one time. I think I've seen you in face-to-face one time.
Yeah, like 6-7 years ago or something.
Yeah, I remembered back. It was 2017. Okay. At the time, I was a youth minister in East Texas. You were also in East Texas at the time. And we went to the same ministers retreat conference. I don't remember if it's retreat or conference, that one.
Right.
But we had like some mediocre Tex-Mex. And we were introduced by a mutual preacher friend. If you don't know Jack Wilkie, he works with Focus Press. He does a million things, blogs, podcasts, books. I really recommend the stuff at Focus Press. I love that so much. I've followed it for years. Yeah, he's got a podcast I personally have enjoyed a lot. I watch a fair bit, actually. If you're a Christian, part of the reason why I started doing a podcast is because I just want Christians to have more resources out there. I want them to have more stuff to go to as Christians, because I even know myself as a preacher. I've felt like I've had to look in other places because there's just not a lot that's being put out there by Christians. And
right.
So that's why I really love it, and I wish more people knew about stuff like Focus Press and all of that. But yeah, he's written a couple books, most recently Church Reset. You wrote one about the American education system and parenting, godly parenting, and you've got another one on the way?
Yeah, so I've got one, should be out here in a month or so. It's called Sunday School Catch-Up, and it's just Bible basics for people that didn't grow up in the church. And if you hear about Rehoboam or Melchizedek or some of those names, or even just concept sanctification or words that we don't use in everyday life, and you might go to church and you'll hear the preacher say, well, and as we all know, Joab did, and like, well, maybe you don't. And so it's just kind of 150 entries, real basic short. Here's who this guy is. Here's what this idea is. So again, Sunday School Catch-Up should be out here in mid to late February. So.
And would that be like released on Focus Press, Amazon, or both?
Yep, both. Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, covering his bases. And speaking of on the way, I was just texting you the other day about having 202. You've had 202 in a more severe way than I have 202. My two daughters are 14 months apart. How far apart are the 202 that you've had?
Yeah, so we got twins, and their older brother was 20 months ahead of them, so it was 3 within 20 months.
20 months, then twins.
And then the older girl, which is a couple years, thankfully, a little bit of space there. But
yeah. And you still got hair and stuff. And that's cool. That's encouraging.
Less every week, man. That's just how it goes.
All right. Before we get into the meat of what we're going to talk about today, engaging the culture and understanding how to do that as Christians, how far can we go and all that. Probably the most important question I'm going to ask you is the first one. Prayer. Before or after the chips and salsa? What kind of man are you? I got to know. It's really hard. Sometimes you get there and they put it on the table right as you sit down, and you just kind of start mindlessly doing it. So you got to, I don't know, you got to get in that habit. If they take a minute, if you sit down, the table's empty, okay, let's go ahead and pray. But, it's very, very important in that Texan culture. You're very right. So true. That is so true. If they take long with the chips and salsa, you're like, let's just do this now. We got some time. But,
that's right.
Yeah, I try. It's kind of weird. I don't hide when I pray, like at a restaurant or something like that. But I do try to make it, like, time it so it's like real smooth with the waiter. Like I know that as a waiter, especially if I wasn't a Christian, I wouldn't want to be like, so how's everyone doing? I go, hold on, we're gonna start to pray,
Right, or holding 8 plates while you're waiting for them to amen.
Yeah. I'm like a depending on who I'm with kind of guy. If I know people, like I have some of my family, they pray before the chips and salsa. And so there have been times where I've sat down and I start snacking on chips and salsa, and they kind of look like, you're not going to
You
pray.
didn't, it wasn't blessed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. And I've said oftentimes on the first day of every month, I pray for all my food for the whole month. That way I just take care of it. No, I don't actually do that. But yeah, I always have to know. I spoke to Jeff Jenkins and I asked him the same question, and he just totally shot me with his amazing wisdom. He said, I pray before, during, and after the meal. I'm constantly thanking God during the meal. And I thought, well, thank you for setting the bar so high.
There you go. Yeah. It's pretty hard to top that. Yeah.
So I talked about all the stuff you do, and I've seen you talk about and write about why you do what you do. But I want to ask you the question in this way. Why have you personally made the decision to say, I'm going to put all this stuff out there on the internet? I want to reach people on the internet too, with blogs, with podcasts, with books. Is it like a personality thing for you, or is this like something that you believe that we should all be engaged in to some degree? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to Christ as Lord. And so that he's not just Lord over your 5 steps of salvation doctrine or your instrumental versus a cappella worship. I mean, he's Lord over those things, but he's Lord over the husband you are, the employee you are, the father you are, the sports watcher you are. Well, whatever it may be, whatever you do, you're doing it under his authority. You're doing it as a citizen of his kingdom. And I think a lot of times Christians miss this, that we talk about doctrine, but when you look at that word doctrine, especially, Timothy and Titus, Paul's telling them to preach doctrine, and he's talking about, here's how you take care of widows. Here's how you treat younger women. Here's how, I mean, just if a man doesn't provide for his own, he's worse than an infidel. All of these things of like day-to-day household life that come up in those gospels, Titus 2, the older women teaching the younger to love their husbands, be keepers at home, all those things that it talks about in there is not Sunday morning fare. It's Monday morning fare. And that's doctrine. And so if we're going to preach doctrine and say we've got sound doctrine, it has to cross over into all of these other areas. And that's our big passion at Focus Press, especially, is the Christian worldview, is that everything that you do, you've got to run it back through the filter of the Bible, because Jesus is Lord. That's what you signed up for.
That's very interesting. I don't think I've heard you put it that way before. And I haven't heard you put it like very differently. I just haven't heard you put the same message that way. That I don't want to bring this back to myself. I know I'm talking to you, but that was a big reason why I wanted to do this myself, to do a podcast, and why I even called it In Between Sundays.
Yeah, I love the name.
With this in mind, I know preachers, and I bet you've probably encountered these preachers before, like this type of preacher. I remember hearing one preacher talk about another who emphasizes a lot like understanding how to live in the culture that we live in. And he goes, oh, preachers like him, let me guess, you heard him speak somewhere and he talked about culture, and you heard him speak at another place and he talked about culture, and this guy, all he wants to do is just talk about the world that we're living in, the culture that we're living in. I mean, why can't you just preach the Bible and then whatever, it'll take care of all of that? Why do you have to give specific emphasis to the culture? They all they want to do is just talk about the culture. One, have you heard that before? And two, what do you think about that kind of a criticism or complaint?
Generally speaking, not just in the church, but culturally, society wide, it's looked at as kind of grimy or icky to get into these issues. Kind of just like, well, let people have their thing, and like, don't just stay in your lane. Essentially, is what they're saying, and that's kind of my point with the Christ as Lord, is his lane is everything. Number one, but number two, again, the In Between Sundays, like I said, I love the name because when you preach a Christianity that's just kind of a generic, very much the over spiritualized, I guess is a way you could say it, that doesn't get into the Monday morning concerns, the workplace concerns, the in-home concerns, things like that, what you're putting on your TV for your family, things like that. What Christians learn to do is separate the two, and they live totally differently from Monday to Saturday than they do on Sunday. And you go and you confess all these wonderful doctrines, sing all these great songs, then you walk out the door and you look exactly like the world. And the way to address that is to talk about the world that the Christians are living in and point to it and say, here's why we're different than that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's why. And we've kind of gone to this approach to go, what's the minimum? What theological minimalism is a term,
Mm-hmm.
some people, I didn't coin it, but we use a lot on our podcasts, is okay, you can't be a homosexual, you can't commit adultery, you can't fornicate, porn is bad, and amen to all of those things. But what's good? It's kind of like we'll tell you what you can't do, and then the rest we're just going to leave it to you. Go figure it out for yourself. No, in the same place, the same with the workplace. Okay, you can't steal, you can't, be a lazy time thief kind of worker. Few things like that, principles that you're not supposed to do. But like, what should a Christian do in the workplace? What is integrity and working with all your might and setting the example and being a light in your labor? And I mean, there's so many things like this. Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, those touch real life, the nitty gritty of Monday through Saturday. And so, yeah, the way you address that with people is culture is, hey, you live in this. You're aware of the politics going on. You're aware of the entertainment that's on TV. You're aware of what people are talking about. And yet we're supposed to come into our church buildings and pretend like, all right, let's seal the door. All of that goes away for the next 2 hours, and then you're going to go back there into it. Like,
Yeah.
no, we're going to come in here and train you how to go out into that with, with your salt and light.
Yeah, yeah. I've noticed that there tends to be that kind of an environment of like we're gonna pretend like this is not what we're dealing with every single
Hmm.
day. Sometimes we in when we talk to each other as Christians, we naturally have to give off the impression that we're doing super great all the time, and
Yeah.
we're all like, all right, we're gonna show up and we're gonna play this game, and
Hmm.
for the next 2 hours, everything is dandy, everything is
Yep.
so great, and maybe the sermon really convicted me personally, and I know that I would love for the church to pray for me. No chance I'm going up there. No
Right.
chance of going up there because we're playing this game that we're all good, and I don't want them to know that I have problems in my life. I
Hmm.
know that everyone else has problems, and I know that I have problems, but I'm not about to say that out loud.
Right.
It's like, what are we doing? What's the game that we're playing? That's kind of what you're describing, right?
Yeah, the church doors are sealed, and the interconnected relationships we're supposed to have don't extend past the church doors. If the church puts on a program like, okay, we're gonna have potlucks or we're gonna have this fellowship thing, that's great, but like, what about you being a Christian, pursuing a relationship with other Christians, being hospitable or visiting
Hmm.
or calling, praying, whatever it may be, and so that you have people that you can lean on in those moments that you have. But again, we kind of seal the door. But the other approach is to bring culture into the church in a way that like compromises with it,
Uh-huh.
and really leans into, oh, we're just like them out there. We watch the same shows, we listen to the same music, and we'll adapt all of that to ourselves. And I think a lot of Christians see that and they're like, no, 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 we shouldn't mix with culture. And it's just these two pendulum things of we're applying Christ to culture, and
Yeah.
we're making sure again that it leaves the door with you into the life that you're leaving. Like you say, not a nice dress up for 2 hours to come perform this thing and then call it good.
We have to understand the world that we're living in to be able to help the world that we're living in. I don't know if you've ever gotten this advice. I know I got it very early on as a preacher. They go, if you really want to help the church that you're going to start working at or that you've just started working at, objective number one needs to be to understand who those people are. And
Hmm.
if you get to know them, you're going to know where they could use your help in their lives. You're going to know why they are the way that they are. You shouldn't just come in and diagnose a bunch of people you don't know
Hmm.
with something. And and that's great advice. But what I found personally is that we don't apply the same thing to the world that we live in and go, hey, we should be aware of what's going on in this world so that we can know how to help the world. Is that kind of where you're coming from with all this?
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of started off big on culture war issues, as I said, kind of 13 years with Focus Press, but even
Mm-hmm.
before that, coming out of preaching school, I was big on those issues. And then for a while I drifted away of kind of just preach the gospel. Let's keep it gospel centered. And that's totally misunderstanding what the gospel is. Again, that's going back to the Lordship of Christ, but really shied away from that and tried to just preach textually, give people the knowledge and not so much cultural application. And I had a few members, this was actually there's probably a little overlap there, I think, for a few months where you and I lived like 15 minutes apart,
Yeah.
and it's on me. I never got together.
I
We talked
never
about,
got
oh, let's
together
get
with you either.
right, right. But when I was there in Forney, we had a few members who, we started talking about certain things, and I was really avoiding the cultural issues, and it came that I think three of them had been put through workplace sensitivity training of here's how to use people's preferred pronouns,
Mm.
and here's how to, the transgender thing. If this a couple of them were school administrators. Well, if this little boy comes in a skirt, you've got to acknowledge it. You got to let him use the bathroom and locker room that he wants to, and this is in Texas. I mean, very religious churches on every corner, Texas. Um, and it hit me. I've left these people totally unequipped to handle that. I mean, they're asking, do I use the pronouns? I mean, like, do I just have to go in and confront it and lose my job? How do you kind of do the wise as serpents, innocent as doves thing on this? And we talked through it, and here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, here's what's right and what's wrong. And
Hmm.
the best thing that you can do for this kid is not to affirm this, but you don't also have to come out and say, fire me, as you can, if you can stay in there and maintain your influence, without compromising, that's probably the best situation. So we kind of worked through what does that look like in your situation? And it just hit me like a train that I am being, Mr. Holy and aside from all of this thinking that I was not touching these icky cultural issues. And the people in my pews, this is what they're dealing with every day. I might lose
Hmm.
my job if I get this wrong. So what do I do? What does God want me to do? I'm like, okay, and so I started preaching on cultural issues, and we did a few sermons on LGBT things like that. And it's not that every week, but you got to know what people are dealing with and equip them for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you if you think that we and just speaking in terms of maybe our own personal experience in the church have made the mistake of being either behind the times or acting like the times are not what they are today. I sort of hear two sides sometimes. Some say like, no, just do the friendship evangelism. You won't need to get into the podcast, the social media world,
Hmm.
it's like you won't need to get out into all that. Just do the friendship evangelism thing. And basically, what I'm asking is, how important is your job?
That's I think about that all the time. Is this
Yeah.
something worth doing?
Yeah.
One of the things is, we get a lot of Christians who are, familiar with Focus Press or whatever. When we put out a podcast, they're like, great. But we've also had a lot of people who are like, man, I was searching everywhere and I came across this, and this has helped me a lot. It's for those people. It is for the people that the YouTube algorithm is going to catch. There's a million bad things that they're going to find. Put something out there that, a good thing. And I just love it when I see, you've got In Between Sundays going. We've got ours going. You've got a bunch of other people, and I don't want to start naming names because I'm gonna forget somebody. But there's so many
Yeah.
great Christian content makers right now, that it's important. Again, this is the public square. This is going out there, and it's not the same as face-to-face evangelism. I'm not claiming that that's what I'm doing when we put a podcast out or write an article. On the other hand, you're strengthening Christians, because one of the other things, I've been blessed to travel and speak and be around the country. There's a lot of churches without elderships. There's a lot of churches without preachers, or with somebody filling in that might not really know what they're doing. And they're trying. I give them the credit for putting forth the effort, but like they just don't have somebody.
Hmm.
And so when these resources are out there, that's really a blessing to those Christians, or Christians where they just feel like they're not really being fully fed. You can't replace their local preacher. You can't replace their local leadership, but you want to just kind of send that signal of, man, somebody's out there. Here's some strong content, hopefully, that helps you with your walk, because for Christian and non-Christian, there's people looking, there's people starving. And again, say you're in a church that just won't touch cultural subjects. I'm really not big on, well, go leave and find a better church. On the other hand, it's
Hmm.
good to have content out there that'll help you navigate those things.
I know myself growing up, I grew up in Los Angeles in the public school system in Los Angeles, and somehow I'm still alive today.
Right.
But there was a lot of kids growing up. A lot of my friends were just like default atheists. It's like the
Yeah.
assumed belief was just that God doesn't exist. It's nonsense. And
Hmm.
I would hear that from teachers and stuff. And so if you don't know any, I would encourage you to either widen your circle. To widen your circle, number one, but also again, you'll probably meet one eventually if you are trying to widen your circle as far as reaching people with the gospel. But you said something. You said the word marketplace or
Hmm.
town square. I
Right.
usually refer to them in that kind of a way. It's we say that, like, hey, Christians should take advantage of podcasts, like Christian podcasts, articles, and stuff like that, because this is what the people in the marketplace, the people in the town square are dealing with, and we want to be prepared to help them to a certain level as much as we possibly can. But the question is, and what we're going to deal with now with the second part, how far into the marketplace can we go before we become the people who need saving? So that was a clip from the larger conversation that we had. The full versions are going to be uploaded on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. You can see every single video that I do without the edits. For the sake of time, you'll see the full version of all of them if you want that. You also get a weekly Q&A. You also get priority for video submissions for potential podcasts. But I will upload other parts of our conversation here on this channel as well, so please be looking forward to that. I love you. I'm so glad you're here. God bless you always. I will see you soon.